Hi, this is my first video ever and I will show you a way to improve the graphics in all the games you play so they will look like 120 frames per second even if they are originally 30 FPS games. Assassin's Creed Valhalla in quality mode is 30 FPS and as you can see this TV can transform it into a smooth experience with impressive clarity. For comparison, I will show you the original output in game mode which has no post-processing by the TV. So there is much glare and juddering when rotating. You were always told to use game mode when you play games to avoid any input lag, but post-processing by the TV usually adds an under 100 millisecond input lag, which is not that perceivable on some game genres. The good news is that this input lag can be lower depending on your TV model, and also with a proper combination of various picture settings it can get even lower. So I will show you how exactly you should adjust the overall picture settings on a Sony Bravia X890 so you can get a smooth motion and clarity that looks like 120 frames per second, feels responsive as 60 frames per second, and with the least possible input lag, even with Dolby Vision enabled. In the meantime, the actual output of the console will be at 60 or 30 FPS with high quality graphics, thus achieving a perfect synergy between console and TV processing power. Sony offers the best motion technology, and if you own one of its latest models, you can apply these or similar settings. If you own a TV of another brand, they can do it too, but you will have to find the proper settings by yourself. When you change a setting, be sure to check how it affects the input lag by playing a racing game, as a high input lag has a huge impact on how well you can drive. Also play a shooter and try to aim the gun at a specific contour to check input linearity. That means to check the movement you see on TV, if it is proportional to how much you press the button on the controller. The procedure of finding the proper settings may seem chaotic at first because of so many possible combinations. You need to apply the same basic logic as in everything in life. So you start with an axiom that is taken for granted to be true. In this case, it is the default factory settings inside each picture mode. And as a parallel in life is what they teach you at school, an axiom. Before you are able to question authority and do your own thing, you need to have a proper understanding of the different components which make up the whole and study each one of them while keeping the others unchanged to serve as constants. Then you apply the scientific method, which means you experiment with alternatives for the variable value of the setting you study and observe the results. This way, you will begin building your own truths from experience. So for each specific setting, you will think you know which is the correct choice. The tricky part though is that everything is codependent. So if you combine your own truths and the result is not perfect, you need to change your tactic to learning by the mistakes. Try to recognize which settings at certain values have a very negative effect, so that way you will know they are the ones making the difference. When you limit these to a minimum of 2 or sets of 2, try to find the proper combination of values for these settings by trial and error. If you have patience, at some point you will know what you are doing. After all, as a gamer, in a virtual world with no real consequences, you have trained your mind to apply the trial and error method more than anyone else living life by the book for safety. That said, for everyone that already owns a TV, if you haven't purchased yet an HDMI 2.1 TV, I highly recommend you this 85-inch X890 or X908 in the USA, if you can still find it on sale, because it is a 2020 model and maybe it is out of stock now. Size matters, so I believe it's better to buy this 85-inch TV over a newer one or an OLED with a smaller panel for the same money. Either way, having a good TV for gaming at home will come in handy, because when the new vaccine and a convenient new variant of the virus arrive, restrictions will return and will continue until QR code and biometrics readers are installed everywhere. They designed all of this, so when they later introduce the new digital ID for all citizens around the world, that infrastructure will be there, up and running in every public building, and most importantly, the people will be already trained to conform to this level of control. The real people in power, not their puppets, the politicians, can do whatever is needed in order to achieve their goal of creating a utopia for themselves, in which their subjects are controlled with cheap implants, and genetic medicine is advancing and promises life prolonging. So they developed and unleashed the virus, tested the mRNA technology on the population to gather medical data for further research, and dictated all the lies you are supposed to embrace in order to recruit you as an enforcer of their control system to others out of fear. Now I will sneak a bit more of this conspiracy stuff from a religious point of view, concealed in this video, so the right people may have access to it through synchronicity. You can skip 5 minutes if you are mad with me for what I already said, because that content won't be for you. Or you can stay to watch Valhalla perform at 60 FPS now that I will change it to performance mode. So these people don't regard themselves as evil, but rather as wise, who serve the greater purpose of reflecting the divine order to this world, when they are actually projecting the order of the natural world to a divine state. You should know that no man ever does evil deeds and actually consider himself to be evil. There is always a justification in his mind that these are a necessary sacrifice in order to bring about something good for himself or his group, and in the latter case he even feels a hero. So for you to understand them, I would need to explain to you how concepts such as hierarchy and sacrifice work in their system of values, in contrast to the one implied in the Bible. In their hierarchy, the superior are justified to sacrifice their inferior for the greater good of their own kind, because that is happening in nature, in the food chain, and also in the cycle of life. Every cell is expendable in order other cells to thrive. This is why the most common and ancient symbol of endorsing this hierarchy is the horn hand sign, which you may think it means rock and roll, or even I love you, thanks to occultist Helen Keller, but it actually means the horns of the alpha male of the herd, a symbol of superiority in nature. But in nature, there is also a case the superior sacrifice themselves for the inferior's sake, and that's the case of parents for their offspring. It is what God, through Jesus Christ, stands for, and it is the opposite of Lucifer, who wanted his superiority recognized and denied serving us, his inferiors. Unlike the rest 2/3 of the angels, who stayed and still do it without recognition. Both kinds of wisdom coexist, because after all you are here seeking the knowledge of good and evil. God's wisdom is not of this world, can only work in loving relationships, and can be applied in organized society, like theirs can, when combined with hypocrisy, of course. It has nothing to do with organized religion, and embracing it is a spiritual path for each individual to claim being worthy of immortality inside God's family. On the other hand, with their wisdom, you are going places in this world. And it may seem logical to choose the sure thing, but that's only because you don't know with what you trade it for. They know, but they also believe the serpent's lie, you will not surely die when your eyes are opened. It is the fake promise of an alternative way to immortality in their utopia, without God, but with genetic medicine and through your sacrifice. All this may sound weird to you, so I will simplify it to terms everybody is used to. You are a valuable resource to them, and they need an efficient system to manage you, which has its cost, your well-being or even your life, and they are self-entitled and willing to pay that cost. If you have been researching for years and you think you are ready to learn the greatest secret of this world, Google this, the unification of the planets in Mercury. The only results in Google will be from my Facebook page, where in 2012 I uploaded 1,000 photos of secret symbols from my archive, and you can continue there your journey deeper down the rabbit hole. Also subscribe to this channel, and if a large audience is built, I will make more videos to elaborate when the time arrives. I'm not eager to be hated for telling the truth anytime sooner. After all, in my language, to witness and reveal the truth is called martyro, to be martyred, torture and kill. So I kept a low profile for more than 10 years. Anyway, sorry for taking advantage of your attention to tell you things you didn't want to hear. Think of it as an advertisement for my sponsor. So back to topic. The latest TVs have HDMI 2.1 and support 4K at 120 frames per second. So everybody talks about these features while ignoring how much effective is their motion technology. 120 frames per second is smooth and responsive, but comes with a trade-off in resolution and graphical fidelity, as it consumes a lot of processing power of your console. Thus, developers rarely offer this mode, as their intention is to focus on delivering the most impressive graphics possible, so they compromise with lower frame rates. VRR, on the other hand, is useful for stability when games are trying to reach 120 frames per second, but is not generally necessary, as most console games have a stable frame rate of 60 or 30 by now. This stability makes possible the use of motion technology. Sony's motion technology is a combination of brightness and clarity enhancements with motion flow, which consists of BFI, black frame insertion, that offers even more clarity, and frame interpolation, which doubles the frame rate. Sadly, when interpolation is set on high for 30 FPS games, it introduces a little input lag and some artifacts around the player. Also, when turning around extremely fast, it's not that effective because there is not enough time to process. Combined with incorrect clarity and contrast settings, also messes with input linearity, making movements disproportional to your input. Thus, it is not ideal for competitive multiplayer, where every millisecond in responsiveness counts. Gamers in multiplayer are also used in turning around in crazy speeds, so some may feel nausea using it. It is ideal though for all the other games, especially those where you explore the environment with slow movements. So an important setting when using interpolation is not on the TV, but in the game options. To truly appreciate the result, you need to set the sensitivity of the thumbsticks of the controller to relatively low. Another important setting in the game options is to lower or turn off completely motion blur, as it was there to compensate for the stutter and judder that you won't be seeing anymore. So, we set the picture mode to custom, go to picture settings, go to motion, set motion flow to custom and adjust the clearness slider to 1. This is the black frame insertion and it is called deblur on some other TVs. For 60 FPS games, adjust the smoothness to 2. This is the interpolation and it is called the judder on other TVs. For 30 FPS games, adjust the smoothness to max and turn fill mode to auto. But I don't do that in custom. I use a separate picture mode for 30 FPS games, so I don't have to adjust the inner settings of custom every time for each game. I just choose a picture mode depending on the game's frame rate. So for Red Dead Redemption, which is 30 FPS, I use either standard or cinema, because I have dedicated 2 ready-made modes for each frame rate to choose between them what is best for each game. Custom and vivid for 60 FPS games, cinema and standard for 30 FPS games, and game and graphics for 120. The first one, cinema, the clearness is set to 1, which is the lighter BFI, and it is recommended for most games. At the second, it is set to 2, which offers even more clarity in some games, depending on the game engine. It dims the screen very much, but this can be counteracted. Sadly, you also lose some HDR highlight and color accuracy, so you will decide if the trade-off is worth it. On non-HDR games, as a countermeasure for the dimming, you can turn off the light sensor, and this way you can adjust the brightness as much as you want. On all games, HDR and non-HDR, you can find a combination of local dimming and contrast enhancement that counteract this dimming, but don't focus only to that goal, because the wrong combination of these and clarity settings will increase input lag or mess with input linearity. So I will show you the perfect combination of brightness and clarity settings that apply on firmware version 6.1554. But today, 22nd of the 2nd of 22, just before I upload, a new update rolled out in USA only, so if needed I will make a new video. So I will show you now the inner settings for the picture modes. For 30 FPS we use a cinema and standard. We go to picture settings to see inside, and the biggest difference between them is that in motion flow, in cinema the clearness is set to 1 and in standard set on 2. And they both have smoothness at max and fill mode to auto. In cinema you can adjust the first 4 as you like, but the next 4 are important, and in all picture modes they must be like this: black adjustment off, advanced contrast enhancer high, auto local dimming high, and extended dynamic range medium. Also, in all picture modes you should leave a color at 50 and live color off. Even if you like more color, you should not adjust this, because they add input lag, and also you never mess with hue. In cinema we put color temperature expert 1, and for cinema the sharpness is at 5. In all picture modes, reality creation resolution is at 95, and these two are always off. In standard, we make sure that we have a clearness at 2, and the rest the same. In brightness, you need to adjust this at maximum to counteract the dimming of the clearness at 2. And these are the same, and color the same, also expert 1 here. But in clarity, you should put sharpness at 75 to also counteract the dimming of the clearness at 2. And again, these, as all in picture modes, off and 95. For 60 FPS games, we use custom and vivid. The difference between them is again that in custom clearness is set on 1 and vivid at 2, and they both have smoothness at 2 and film mode off. Custom is like cinema, so the first 4 you can put whatever you like depending on the light of the room, and this as always off, high, and medium. Color always 50 and live color off. Color temperature can be either at expert 1 with clarity at 35 or at neutral with sharpness at 50. And again, reality creation 95 and this off and off. Vivid has a clearness at 2 and again smoothness 2 and film mode off. This should be at maximum to counteract the dimming. This always the same. Here we have a different color temperature. It's the only mode that Expert 2 works better, with clarity at 75. If you don't like the Expert color temperature, you can put neutral with sharpness at 50. But only this can happen only for 60 FPS games. And reality creation, again 95 resolution, and these both off. For 120 frames per second games, you can use a game mode as it is, since it is smooth already, but although it doesn't need motion interpolation, there are many clarity enhancements offered in Sony TVs that you can take advantage in game mode, for example. So in game, we put brightness, the first 4 what you want, the next the same off, high, and medium. Here color is by default 55, so we leave it there. And we use a color temperature expert 1 that goes with sharpness 75 and reality creation 95. And these all are off by default. I also have graphics as an alternative that is the same but with some clearness at 2. Black frame insertion is not needed in 120 frames per second. I just use it as an alternative profile, and that goes with max brightness as already stated, and all these the same. All the settings I show you on the PS5 can be applied on a Series X, but 120 frames per second is not set automatically on Series X. You need to come here on the display options and select it, but remember to select it only when you play a game that it is 120 frames per second, because if you leave it at 120 Hz here and you play a 30 FPS game, the setting I show you won't work. So keep it on 60 if you don't play a game that is 120. Also on a Series X you can have Dolby Vision, and I show you how you do it in case you don't know. You go here, and here is where you select it. In Dolby Vision there are 3 picture modes that you can adjust. I use the Dolby Vision Bright for 30 FPS games. So in motion, I put a clearness at 2, smoothness max, and film mode to auto. Brightness at maximum. These all the same, off, high, and medium. again color 50 and live color off, but color temperature neutral here with clarity 50, because the colors are very accurate in Dolby Vision and you don't want to mess with that. And also resolution again at 95 and this off and off. For 60 FPS games I use Dolby Vision Dark, which it is similar to custom, so it has a motion flow clearness 1, the others the same, brightness what you want in this the same, and the only difference is that here I use color temperature neutral with clarity sharpness 50, and all the others the same. And I also have an alternative mode where the motion has clearness at 2, brightness max, this the same. Just remember that in Vivid I use Expert 2 as an exception. And here 75 and the same.